Welcome to today's Explainer. We've got a absolutely incredible, emotionally profound journey to unpack today. We're looking at a story of raw human endurance, literally a journey spanning almost 2 decades of soaring hopes, crushing defeats, and ultimately just massive resilience. If you've ever felt like the odds were impossibly stacked against you, or that your big breakthrough was always just out of reach, well, this narrative is going to resonate deeply with you. We're going to walk through an immigrant's 18-year crucible, exploring not just what happened, but the immense emotional and spiritual evolution that took place along the way. Okay, let's dive into this. Every great, arduous journey begins with a spark of hope, right? And this story kicks off with a really powerful declaration. I'm not just leaving, I'm going to build a better life. All the pain will be worth it. This wasn't just some casual relocation. It was a huge, life-altering sacrifice fueled by completely bright optimism. He was leaving everything familiar behind, anchoring his heart to the firm belief that whatever hardships came next, the ultimate reward of a better life would absolutely justify the pain of leaving. But the distance between that initial spark of hope and actually realizing the dream, it was incredibly vast. 18 years. Seriously, I want you to just sit with that number for a second. 18 years. 18 years of waiting, struggling, and hoping. When he first made that hopeful declaration, he probably imagined a few tough months, maybe a hard year or two of settling in. He never could have anticipated that his perseverance would be tested for nearly 2 decades. The sheer devastating weight of 18 years stands in such stark contrast to the quick success he originally envisioned. Let's move along and see how this builds, because the shock of arrival was pretty much immediate. He came with this imagined dream, finding out that America was indeed beautiful just like he'd hoped, but his day-to-day existence completely disconnected from that beauty. He was plunged almost instantly into a really harsh reality. He quickly discovered he lacked the proper legal papers required to work and establish himself. And without those crucial documents, he just kept hitting a continuous wall of closing doors. The systemic barriers were instant and seemingly impenetrable. It created this massive gap between the dream he imagined and the reality he had to navigate every single day. So when you're facing constantly closing doors and your entire future hinges on just one set of documents, desperation inevitably sets in. And unfortunately, that desperation acts like a massive beacon for exploitation. Out of the woodworks, people started approaching him, offering these seemingly magical solutions, whispering guarantees like, I know somebody who could help you get those papers, no problem. And when you're trapped in a corner with absolutely no clear way out, people masquerading as saviors can look incredibly convincing. His vulnerable, undocumented status made him the perfect target for anyone willing to monetize his hope. And this brilliantly illustrates the devastating, repetitive anatomy of the scams he fell for over the years. They operated in 3 brutal, simple steps. Step 1, the promise, a guarantee of an immediate breakthrough, usually something like, I get your papers tomorrow, trust me. Step 2, the transaction, the aggressive demand for payment upfront, give me the cash now. And then step 3, the disappearance. These supposed saviors would just vanish into thin air, taking his hard-earned money and leaving him right back where he started, only poorer and significantly more disillusioned. Just imagine the profound emotional toll of running through that cycle. Not just once, but multiple times over 18 years. It's one thing to face a setback, right? But it's an entirely different kind of psychological torture to be repeatedly elevated by the promise of salvation, only to have the rug violently pulled out from beneath you, over and over again. As the source material acutely notes, every time he thought this is finally my breakthrough, another disappointment came. This repetitive deception and the chronic financial loss, they weren't just logical roadblocks. They were heavy, heavy emotional blows that slowly chipped away at his spirit. Which brings us to what you could definitely call his dark night of the soul. After years of continuous struggle, the weight just became almost unbearable. It led to a profound spiritual and existential crisis. The source text actually documents him crying out in deep agony, asking, why does this keep happening again and again? Have you forgotten me? This was a profound expression of raw human despair. His faith was being tested to its absolute limits. He was staring into the void, confronting the very real, very heavy temptation to just throw in the towel and give up completely. But right at the precipice of complete surrender, something shifted. Amidst all that deafening noise of despair, there was an internal whisper of resilience. A simple but incredibly powerful command: don't quit. Think of this phrase as a vital internal lifeline that kept him anchored during his absolute darkest moments. Even when everything in his external environment, every scam, every closed door, every lost dollar, screamed at him to surrender, that quiet, persistent internal voice pushed back. It became the critical turning point of his narrative, a defiant refusal to let the setbacks dictate his final chapter. By holding on to that internal command to keep going, his perspective began to subtly yet profoundly shift. He remembered that his life was simply bigger than his present situation. Now, when you really think about it, this is a monumental cognitive leap. When you're deeply embedded in an 18-year struggle, the struggle often consumes your entire identity. But he actually managed to mentally separate his inherent worth and his ultimate trajectory from the grueling hardships of his current reality. He realized that his lack of papers and the betrayals he suffered did not and absolutely could not define his entire existence. So, the crucial point is this internal realization blossomed into a radiant breakthrough. It culminated in this powerful paradigm shift. God was building me, not just blessing me. He transitioned from viewing himself as a passive victim of endless misfortune to seeing himself as an active participant in a larger process of spiritual and personal formation. Those closed doors, they were no longer just cruel rejections. They were newly perceived as deliberate instruments of character building. Let's actually break down what these 18 years of closed doors accomplished. Because with this new framework, he realized that every season, even the most uniquely painful ones, taught a specific, necessary lesson. The hardships he endured served a much greater purpose in forging his resilience. But most importantly, he concluded that the extreme lows of his journey did not cancel the ultimate plan for his life. Those 18 years of scams and closed doors, they weren't wasted time. They were the very crucible that forged the unshakable strength, wisdom, and purpose he walks in today. Now, what's really interesting about his message today is how he connects this hard-earned wisdom directly to us. 18 years later, his message isn't one of bitterness or regret. Not at all. It's an urgent, empowering call to endurance. He says, if you feel like giving up, don't quit. Your story isn't over. Keep praying, keep believing. He's basically taking the exact lifeline that saved him in his darkest moment, that faint whisper to not quit, and offering it as a beacon to anyone out there currently navigating their own long, seemingly hopeless struggle. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of this explainer. We've seen how nearly 2 decades of deception, financial ruin, and closed doors didn't break our subject. Instead, it built him into someone incredibly resilient. So I want to turn this directly over to you. What is your struggle building within you? When you reframe your own setbacks not as punishments, but as preparation, how does that change your perspective on your current reality? Let that linger as you face whatever doors might be currently closed in your own life. Thank you so much for joining us for today's explainer, and remember, your story isn't over.